All right, let's talk with Sky in Colorado.
All
Colorado Sky.
right.
Hello, Sky. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. It's so great to talk to you guys again.
You too.
Thank you.
Happy
Hey.
early birthday.
Appreciate it. Thank you. What can we help you with today? What are your thoughts?
Um, so I have been deconstructing a lot recently, and right now I'm kind of trying to look at homeschooling because I was homeschooled my entire life,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to look at it skeptically, and I was kind of trying to get your guys' opinion on it. Like my experience is very mixed, and I do realize that my experience is also that of like an evangelical homeschooler, and that is not everybody's,
Right.
but it is like the majority in my understanding. But like seeing like, is it like a net positive, a net negative, and how do I go about looking at that? Do I look at studies? Do I look at my own experience and other people around me? And what are your thoughts, and how did you think about it?
Yeah, that is a really great conversation topic. And as a fellow lifelong evangelical homeschooled kid, I feel your pain. I see you. You are not alone. Yeah, so homeschooling is a bit of a tricky topic because you think you're being so tricky. It's no sneaky, but your chair just went into the screen. Sorry, Sky. Eric sneakily got up, but didn't so sneakily get up. So homeschooling can be tricky because there is a small subset that do it for, I don't want to say the right reasons, but reasons that are understandable and, justifiable, right? Maybe their school district is horrible and they actually have the resources to train their children better outside of that school. Maybe their child is neurodivergent in some way and they don't have access to like a special ed class or something. And so they need to make sure that their kid is safe and, taught in a way that works for them. In those cases, I think homeschooling can be a viable option. But in those cases, I think that it needs to operate within a structure, right? And we need to make sure that people are being monitored in terms of what they're teaching, that regular testing is happening so that people can, make sure that these kids are getting the adequate education that they need throughout their educational life. Which is something that I had the benefit of growing up in Pennsylvania. They did have an evaluator come in every year and talk with us and ask us how things were going and review some of our homework. And then we also had to take standardized testing specifically for homeschooled kids to make sure that we were very, methodically hitting those benchmarks. So it was very helpful to make sure that my mom had that support and that structure and that feedback, and also protected us from ever being taken advantage of in that way, or, having that education be too lax, or maybe, didn't do a great job with the whole creationism bit. But other than that, I think I got the kind of education that at least got me where I am today. The issue is that a lot of the homeschooling community, possibly most of it, is basically, it's tied very closely with evangelical Christianity. And it also is tied very closely with this distrust of the government, this very super fundamentalist, super conservative movement that, absent anything informing that worldview, can become very damaging, very dangerous, and very cult-like very quickly. So there is the concern that the pushback against regulation, the pushback against supervision, ultimately ends up with kids being abused at worst, right? Or even at best, just miseducated to the point where they are put at a significant disadvantage when they do try to do something like get a job or go to college or even, study for the GED and get an actual degree, right? Like, there are a lot of issues when you take away or push back against the regulation component and the supervision component. With them, I absolutely think we could make it work. It could be a viable option. But the majority of the conversation that we've had, at least so far as a country, seems to be around my freedoms, which isn't a good argument, frankly. So I don't know. That's the kind of overview that I've gathered after looking at it for a couple of years. Sky, what do you think?
Yeah, that's really close to what I'm coming towards. Is like my experience. I also was had standardized tests to make sure that I was keeping on, and like I want to just say, like, for the record, my mom did a really good job homeschooling me. Like, for example, I graduated college at 19 with a bachelor degree because I was homeschooled, and that was the only way I would have been able to do that. And that's a really big advantage for me, and I know that. But at the same time, I wasn't taught evolution. I wasn't taught history in the right way.
Yeah.
You know, the way that it actually is in reality versus what a lot of white evangelical Christians think it is.
Right.
You know, and it's hard for me to look back at it and go like, oh yeah, that was totally, like, my mom should totally have done that, versus, oh no, you know, like, look at all these disadvantages I was put at. And like, there is something to be said. One of the big things about homeschooling that people bring up a lot is like the social aspect of it. Like, how are these kids ever going to get socialized?
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna bring up. Yeah.
Yeah. There are ways to do it that are really good at socializing and stuff. Like, I was a part of a lot of clubs growing up. But then in my teens, I was isolated. So there is a way to do it both ways, you know.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I went to public school, and my experience there is just not great. And so I have, a lot of things that I see in homeschool, and especially a lot of the people who've reached out haven't reached out because they had great experiences. You know, people who've reached out to me, at least, have wanted to share about how they went the first 18 years of their life without getting, allowed to open a book, or were given a book, the good book.
Yeah.
And so talking about regulation, totally understood. We had someone in the live chat, Ken, who says, I homeschooled my 3 children for 6 years. 2 are now doctors and 1 is an accountant. And so that just shows the disparity.
You just the way you phrase that made it sound like the doctors are fine, but like, wow, someone's
an accountant.
An accountant.
Well, okay,
wow.
so to be honest, like, I got a lot of respect for accountants. I do.
Oh yeah.
You want to be a doctor because you want to save lives and all of this, right? If you're an accountant, either A, you couldn't pick a major, or B, you really love math. And if you really love math, I'm so glad you exist. So cheers.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of different considerations, and the biggest thing I think that I can say to somebody who maybe is thinking about homeschooling their kids, or is worried about maybe children in their life who are being homeschooled, is, are the parents doing it well, right? Homeschooling is a tool to use, and I've used this example for a bunch of different things. People have asked me, is SEO ethical, right? Or is are these concepts, these constructs that we create, is it inherently moral or immoral? And they're not either, right? They're tools. It's an amoral thing to school your child at home. You can do it really well, and if you can do it really well and make sure that they have access to, social engagement and education and support from a larger network, great. That's awesome. You do you. That might be how your child learns best. But if you use it in a way to get away with things that we have proven help children, right? If you're using it to get away from exposing your children to other worldviews, or having them be educated in actual history and science, or even educating them at all, because I know a lot of homeschoolers, especially in the world that I grew up in, homeschooled their daughters specifically because they didn't expect them to go to college at all. And the homeschooling was home economics, right? It was, how do you cook a meal? How do you,
Manage a household.
mend clothing, right? And that was what they were taught because of a very restrictive and abusive worldview that they were not being called on because they had essentially closed off from the rest of the world. So it's very dangerous if used incorrectly. It absolutely is. And in those instances, it should be called out. But I think that a lot of the people, especially people who, like us, Sky, may have been personally harmed by homeschooling, we do ourselves a disservice if we lump all homeschooling under that one umbrella and say it's all bad always. So as always, I think that nuance and that understanding that there are some people for whom it is a really good choice and who are doing it correctly. As long as we understand that and make space for that, I think speaking out against it when it is harmful is very important.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys letting me talk about this. This is something I could go on and on about forever. I think.
I'm glad y'all had the conversation. I feel like there's really not much that I can add, but hopefully that, we're grateful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a conversation that I think we should continue. Sky, are you part of the Skeptic Generation Facebook group or Discord or anywhere where you can continue to have these important conversations?
Yeah, I'm a part of your guys' Discord.
Awesome. Good. Well, guys, if you have questions for Sky or if you want to talk about this, or I'm seeing a lot of empathy and a lot of engagement in the live chat right now, feel free to go over there and actually continue this, because this is something that I think should be talked about more.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about it more. Thank you guys for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sky.
Y'all have.
Yeah. It's weird. And here's the difficult thing for me when talking about homeschooling is similar to Sky. I think that my mom did as good of a job as she could do with the tools and resources and worldview that she had, right? She was invested, and this was her whole life, and she was invested in doing it correctly. The issue is, absent a larger access to a framework and worldviews and understanding of the world, what that correct might be is very different from what would have been correct, actually.
Yeah.
Right. So my mom, I've had this conversation with her multiple times where we will talk about, the science, the way she teaches science to my younger siblings and the way that they are learning about it. And she is aware that I disagree with her, and she stands by it because in her mind, that is accurate. And so it becomes this echo chamber. If you are not allowing other voices in and actually considering it, you might be doing the best you absolutely can, unimpeachably, well-intentioned, and still be causing harm. And that understanding and that kind of insight into oneself is a lot to ask for every single homeschooled parent, which is why we have the structures in place that we do.
I entirely agree. It makes me think of when you make a photocopy of something that's already a facsimile. When there's that splotch or whatever in that facsimile, you can't copy that out. And so you wind up perpetuating biases that you may not be directly teaching, but you're absolutely right. That's just kind of where you're at. I know that I did not have huge science fans in my parents when I was growing up, but I did have one science teacher who loved science, and I will never, ever forget him. And I will never, ever forget what I learned in his class, just because, that passion was infectious, and you can't get that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, and I've talked about this before, and I think Adam, the atheist, was the one who brought this up when he was doing, I think, an interview with Phil Ferguson, that Another example of this, and I'll move on after this, but this is important, I think. Another example of that kind of facsimile getting introduced into future versions without realizing it because they're just copying it out. My science background was very limited and very not fun. I hated science, but the reason I hated science is because the way that the creationist textbooks that my parents were just like, oh, this is accurate, this is good, we can just give them these. They don't realize that what those textbooks were doing was purposefully making science incomprehensible and
Boring.
not fun and boring and essentially just math all over again to discourage people from getting interested in it and digging deeper. So I think that I personally could have been extremely interested in science.
Yeah.
It was squashed so early on because it was presented as something that was just, math 2.0.
So one of the conversations that we had that really kind of blew my mind with you is as an adult, I think one of the coolest little facts I'd ever heard was that Pythagoras was a cult leader. And so if you are studying math and you go over the Pythagorean theorem, that Pythagoras had a math cult.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy crap, I need to tell V this. And I tell V and you're just like, yeah, of course. I know that.
I knew that.
I was taught that in school. Or I was taught that, while I was growing up. Who learns about the math cult? And why? What is the motivation for that?
Right. It was presented as a way that math could be used antithetical to Christianity, essentially, which is weird that I got this factoid years and years before you did. But in the context of, look at these evil mathematicians.
Yeah. And isn't that just setting the groundwork for bias in the future? And it's amazing. And so that kind of thing, if you are needing to indoctrinate your children or prevent them from learning about other things because it's wild. But anyway, that's a topic for another day.